Wicked. If ever there was a movie whose promo tour seemed specifically designed to turn people away from the end product, it was this. From a tiny, terrified and weirdly infantilized looking Ariana Grande to the emaciated demon monster of Cynthia Erivo sucking the very life force out of her, the two stars of this film were bad enough on their own, but watching them desperately fawn and clutch at each other like tormented POWs so physically and emotionally ruined that everyday noises and simple interview questions seemed to trigger horrifying bouts of PTSD, the question I found myself asking was, my god, what the hell did this movie do to these two women? And is it going to do the same to me? That being the case, I should probably get on with this review before I start wasting away and getting terrified of household objects. I said in my review of Wicked Part 1 that even if I'm not the target audience for this franchise, I still thought it was a competent and visually impressive movie that stayed true to the source material, such as it is, that made the most of its two leads and their obvious musical abilities, and that if you liked the stage production, you were probably gonna love the film. And now that I've seen Part 2, I want to tell you that that opinion has completely stayed exactly the same, which I know isn't the bombastic praise or devastating criticism you were probably hoping for, but stick with me on this because Wicked's devotion to the source material turns out to be both a blessing and a curse in this case. Anyway, if you'll give me just a few TikToks, I'll illuminate you on the plot. The movie picks up sometime after the events of the first film. Elphaba is now public enemy number 1 in the land of Oz, renamed the Wicked Witch of the West, and fueled by a propaganda campaign against her by the Wizard and Michelle Yeoh. And yeah, I know her character probably has a name, but if she's determined not to act in this movie, then I shall treat her as such. But more on that later. Meanwhile, Glinda the Good is now the smiling public face of the new regime, and is busy enjoying all the trappings of fame and popularity that she always dreamed of. She's even engaged to Fiyero now, even though he's totally got the hots for Elphaba, but whatever. What can I say, she must have fucking amazing banter. Matters come to a head when Elphaba tries to reconcile with the wizard, only to discover he's keeping all the animals of Oz imprisoned, so she frees them and ruins Glinda's wedding in the process, so Glinda turns against her and suggests using her sister Nessa to lure her out. So naturally Michelle Yeoh does the sensible thing and summons up a tornado that sucks a house all the way from Kansas and lands it right on Nessa's fucking head.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
And guess who happens to be on board?
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Now, this is the point where Wicked has to awkwardly try and dovetail its story and characters with the events of Wizard of Oz, and funnily enough, it's also the point where the narrative starts to go off the rails a bit. Part of the problem here is the sheer amount of contrived shit the script has to cram in to explain everything that happens in the original movie. The creation of Tin Man, the Scarecrow and the Cowardly Lion, the Wicked Witch of the East and the Ruby Slippers, the construction of the Yellow Brick Road, Elphaba's turn to evil and the abandoned castle she lives in with the flying monkeys, Dorothy's arrival at the Emerald City, her interactions with the wizard, and her imprisonment by the Wicked Witch, and even the final battle where she gets, melted. The movie has to account for all of this stuff in barely half the runtime of the original Wizard of Oz, and it's in such a rush not just to set up and explain everything, but also recontextualize it all from Elphaba's point of view, that it ends up tripping over its own feet half the time. It's a jarring change of pace for a narrative that was fairly well constructed up to that point, and it feels exactly like what it is, a whole other movie that suddenly comes crashing in to spoil the fun, a movie with its own demands, its own rules and its own events and characters that all have to be accommodated in a very short space of time. The stage musical suffered from much the same problem, but it was able to neatly sidestep it by treating its source material with the kind of wink-wink, tongue-in-cheek humour it deserved. It was under no illusions that it was anything other than a slightly silly piece of fan fiction, leeching off a much more iconic and well-established story, but it was willing to laugh at itself and invited the audience to just enjoy it for what it was. And it worked. The problem with the movie version is that it doesn't have that same level of self-awareness or modesty. It's presented more like a legitimate narrative in its own right, just as valid as the real thing. The big dramatic moments are played out for real, like you're expected to believe this is the actual untold story of the Wizard of Oz. And I think that's the film's one weak point, getting ideas above its station and taking itself too seriously. And it's a shame because in most other respects, Wicked for Good is a pretty fun ride. The big musical numbers are all present in correct, the two leads can belt them out like their lives depend on it, and yeah, the film adds a couple of additional tracks that feel a bit anemic compared to the original material, but whatever, it doesn't spoil anything. The production design and the visual style are just as vibrant and colourful as before, and there's a neat little tonal shift that happens whenever Dorothy shows up. The colour grading's got an almost Technicolor look, the camera angles switch to more static, old school cinematography, and what can I say, I just appreciate little details like that. Performances are just as good or as bad as last time. You can tell that Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are good actors because they managed to not act like crazy people for a couple of hours. They look healthier and less skeletal than in real life, and they obviously have good chemistry together because they're one step away from being surgically grafted onto each other at this point. Yeah, if I was going to be super critical, I could point out that Glinda's actually a selfish, opportunistic arsehole for most of the movie, a conspirator in at least one murder, and a possible war criminal who knowingly supports and maintains an oppressive dictatorship because they give her nice shiny things in return, and never really has to face any consequences for her actions, but never mind, let's just not think about it too much.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
That's probably why Michelle Yeoh is such a jarring counterpoint to them. I hate to say this because I really like her as an actress, but holy shit, there's a couple of uncomfortable truths we need to come to terms with here. One, she absolutely can't sing, and two, she really struggles with the English language. Two pretty major problems when you're supposed to be playing a scheming, charismatic villain in a musical. I mean, she's not quite Gal Gadot levels of log cabin acting, but she's also not far off, and I can't shake the feeling that she was badly miscast in this one. Like I said at the start of this review, Wicked for Good is one of those perfect if you like that sort of thing movies. Narratively, it's a bit more chaotic and less streamlined than its predecessor, and the ending's probably going to feel a bit anticlimactic compared to the epic conflict it seemed to be setting up, but the core story still delivers on everything the stage show did. So if you're a fan of part 1, or if you loved the musical and you want to see what it would look like on the big screen, you're probably going to come away from Wicked for Good feeling pretty satisfied. If not, then I don't imagine you'd even bother watching it in the first place, so what the hell are you even watching this review for? Anyway, if you'll excuse me, I've got a sudden urge to have a cheeseburger. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.